Welcome back. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a simple penny, and discovering that this tiny copper coin could actually be worth far more than 1 cent. Most people overlook pennies every single day, tossing them into jars or leaving them behind as spare change. But sometimes, a coin that seems completely ordinary can hide an interesting story, and in some cases, surprising value. Today, we're taking a closer look at the 1979 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that millions of Americans have seen, but very few have truly examined. The 1979 D Lincoln penny was produced at the Denver Mint and is part of the long-running Lincoln Cent series. The Lincoln penny was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. It was the first regular United States coin to feature a real historical person rather than a symbolic figure. By 1979, the Lincoln Cent had already been in circulation for 70 years, making it one of the most recognizable coins in American history. When you look at the front of the 1979 D penny, you will see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. This design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. Above Lincoln's head appears the word Liberty, while the year 1979 is placed to the right of the portrait. Just below the date is the small letter D, which tells us that this particular coin was struck at the Denver Mint. Along the top edge of the coin, you'll find the national motto, "In God We Trust." On the reverse side of the coin, you'll see the classic wheat-free design that had already been in use for 2 decades by that point. Instead of wheat stalks, the back of the coin displays the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. If you look very closely at the memorial, you can even spot a tiny representation of the Lincoln statue inside. Above the building are the words United States of America, and below it is the denomination 1 cent. The phrase E pluribus unum appears above the memorial. Now, by 1979, the United States Mint was producing pennies in enormous numbers. In fact, the Denver Mint struck more than 4 billion Lincoln cents that year. That might sound like a lot, and it is. Because of such large production numbers, most 1979 D pennies are still very common today. But here's where things become interesting. While the average coin may only be worth 1 cent, certain examples of the 1979 D penny can be worth far more depending on their condition and any unusual minting errors. To understand why condition matters so much, we need to talk about how coins are graded. A coin that has circulated in everyday use for years will show scratches, wear, and fading details. These coins are usually worth only face value. But coins that remain in nearly perfect condition, often called mint state, can be much more desirable to collectors. A bright, sharply detailed 1979 D penny that has never really circulated may sell for several dollars or even more depending on its grade. Professional grading companies sometimes assign these coins very high ratings, such as MS65, MS66, or even MS67. At those levels, the coin still has its original luster and almost no visible marks. In some cases, collectors have paid surprisingly strong prices for high-grade 1979 D pennies. For example, certain mint state examples graded at the highest levels have sold for over $100 at auction, simply because so few coins remain in that pristine condition. But condition isn't the only thing collectors look for. Errors can make a coin dramatically more valuable. Minting errors happen during the coin production process, and they can create unusual features that collectors find fascinating. One possible error on a 1979 D penny is a double die, where parts of the design appear slightly doubled due to a misalignment during the die creation process. This can sometimes be seen in the lettering or numbers. Another error collectors search for is an off-center strike. This occurs when the blank coin is not perfectly aligned with the dies during the striking process. As a result, part of the design might be missing while another portion appears shifted toward the edge. Off-center coins are instantly noticeable and can be quite collectible. There are also cases where coins are struck on the wrong type of metal blank. Although rare, a penny struck on a different planchet can become extremely valuable. These kinds of mistakes are uncommon, but when they appear, collectors are eager to find them. If you happen to come across a 1979 D penny and want to know whether it might be special, there are a few simple things you can check. First, look closely at the mint mark. The small D below the date should appear clear and properly shaped. Next, examine the coin's surface. A coin that still shines with its original reddish copper color is usually more valuable than one that has turned dark or heavily worn. You should also check the details of Lincoln's face and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. If the lines are sharp and clearly visible, the coin may be in better condition than most circulated examples. Sometimes, using a magnifying glass can help reveal small details that are hard to see with the naked eye. Weight is another useful clue. A normal Lincoln penny from this era weighs about 3.11 grams and is made primarily of copper with a small amount of tin and zinc. If the coin feels unusually light or heavy, it could indicate something unusual, though professional testing would be needed to confirm it. Another interesting fact about the 1979 D penny is that it was produced during a time when the United States was facing rising metal costs. Copper prices were increasing, and the government was beginning to consider changes to the composition of the penny. Just a few years later, in 1982, the mint officially switched from mostly copper pennies to zinc-based coins with a thin copper coating. That means the 1979 penny is part of the last era of the heavier, mostly copper Lincoln cents. For many collectors, that alone makes these coins appealing. They represent a period before the composition change, when pennies still had that classic copper feel and weight. There are also collectors who enjoy building full date and mint collections of Lincoln pennies. That means they try to gather every year and every mint mark in the series. In those collections, the 1979 D penny plays an important role because it represents the Denver Mint's production for that year. Sometimes, collectors search through rolls of pennies from banks hoping to find coins in exceptional condition. Even though billions were produced, finding a truly perfect example decades later can still be a challenge. That excitement of discovery is one reason coin collecting continues to attract people of all ages. Another surprising detail is that the Lincoln Memorial design used on the 1979 penny remained in circulation until 2008. In 2009, the reverse design changed to celebrate the bicentennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth with 4 special designs representing different stages of his life. After that, the penny adopted the Union Shield design that we see on modern coins today. So when you hold a 1979 D Lincoln penny, you're actually holding a small piece of American history. It represents a time before major design changes, before the shift in metal composition, and during an era when billions of coins were flowing through the nation's economy. For most people, it will always remain a simple 1-cent coin. But for collectors, the story behind the coin is what truly matters. The history, the design, the possibility of rare errors, and the excitement of finding a high-grade example all add layers of interest to something that many people might otherwise ignore. And that leads to an important reminder. Valuable coins aren't always hidden in vaults or museums. Sometimes they're sitting quietly in old jars, forgotten drawers, or the spare change you receive at the grocery store. The next time you come across a 1979 D Lincoln penny, take a moment to look at it more closely. Check the mint mark, examine the details, and see if the coin still has that bright copper shine. You might just discover that the penny you almost overlooked has a story worth far more than a single cent, because in the world of coin collecting, even the smallest coin can hold a surprising amount of history, mystery, and value. And sometimes, the difference between an ordinary penny and an extraordinary one is simply knowing what to look for. Welcome back. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a simple penny, and discovering that the tiny coin you almost ignored could actually be worth far more than 1 cent. It sounds unbelievable, but this is exactly why collectors constantly search through their change. Today we're looking at a coin many people have seen before but rarely think about. The 1984 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. At first glance, it may look completely ordinary, but hidden details and certain rare varieties have made this small copper coin surprisingly interesting to collectors across the United States. The 1984 Lincoln penny is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series, one of the most recognizable coins in American history. The Lincoln cent was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. It was the first regular U.S. coin to feature a real historical figure rather than a symbolic design. Since then, billions of Lincoln pennies have been produced, and they remain a familiar part of everyday life. By 1984, the United States Mint had already been producing Lincoln cents for 75 years. During that time, the design on the front of the coin stayed mostly the same. On the obverse, or front, you see the portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. Above his head is the word Liberty, and the year appears to the right side of the portrait. The phrase "In God We Trust" curves along the top edge of the coin. The reverse design in 1984 still featured the classic wheat-style replacement known as the Lincoln Memorial. This design was introduced in 1959 to celebrate Lincoln's 150th birthday. It shows the Lincoln Memorial Building in Washington, D.C., with the words United States of America across the top and 1 cent across the bottom. Between those two phrases appears the motto E pluribus unum. Now, when we talk about a 1984 penny with no mint mark, we are referring to coins produced at the Philadelphia Mint. For many years, pennies struck in Philadelphia simply did not carry a mint mark at all. Coins made in Denver display a small D, and coins from San Francisco often carry an S. But Philadelphia pennies from that time period were left blank in that area, meaning no mint mark appears below the year. Because of this, millions upon millions of 1984 pennies were produced without a mint mark. In fact, the Philadelphia Mint struck well over 8 billion Lincoln cents that year. That means the average 1984 no mint mark penny is extremely common and usually worth only 1 cent in everyday condition. However, the story becomes much more interesting when collectors start looking closely at small details. Among the billions of coins produced, a few unusual varieties appeared. These varieties are what make certain 1984 pennies far more valuable than most people would expect. One of the most famous varieties from this year is known as the 1984 double die obverse. A double die happens during the coin-making process when the design on the die becomes slightly misaligned during production. When that die strikes coins, the design elements can appear doubled. In the case of the 1984 penny, this doubling is most noticeable on Abraham Lincoln's ear. Collectors sometimes call it the double ear penny. If you look closely at Lincoln's ear on this variety, you will see a clear second outline that almost looks like a shadow or a second ear beneath the first one. This unusual feature was not intentional. It happened during the minting process, which makes the coin a fascinating error variety. While millions of normal 1984 pennies exist, the doubled ear version is much scarcer. Many people spent these coins without realizing what they had. Others still sit unnoticed in jars, drawers, or old coin collections waiting to be discovered. The value of these coins depends heavily on their condition. A worn 1984 penny with no mint mark and no special error is usually worth face value. But a confirmed double die example can be worth significantly more. In circulated condition, collectors may pay anywhere from $20 to over $100 depending on how clearly the doubling is visible. When the coin is found in excellent condition, the value can increase dramatically. High-grade examples that show strong details and very little wear have sold for several $100s. In rare cases where the coin remains in almost perfect mint state condition, collectors have paid even more. Auction records have shown some impressive results for top-quality examples. Coins graded by professional grading services in near-perfect condition have reached prices of several $100s at auction. While that might not sound like millions of dollars, it is still an incredible return for a coin originally worth just 1 cent because valuable varieties exist. Collectors always recommend checking your coins carefully before spending them. The first step is to examine the year. Look for the date 1984 on the obverse of the coin. Next, check directly below the year. If there is no mint mark, the coin was struck in Philadelphia. After confirming that, the most important step is to study Lincoln's ear. Using a magnifying glass or a jeweler's loupe makes this much easier. If you see a clear second outline or doubling on the ear, you may have the famous doubled ear variety. It's also important to make sure the coin hasn't simply been damaged or scratched. True double die coins show consistent doubling that appears as part of the original design. Random scratches or wear usually look irregular and do not follow the shape of the design. Another interesting detail about the 1984 penny involves the metal used to produce it. In earlier decades, pennies were made mostly from copper. But by the early 1980s, the rising price of copper forced the U.S. Mint to change the composition. Starting in 1982, Lincoln cents were made from a core of zinc with a thin copper coating. That means the 1984 penny is technically a copper-plated zinc coin. Even though it still looks like copper on the outside, the inner metal is mostly zinc. This change helped reduce production costs and allowed the penny to remain in circulation despite increasing metal prices. If you weigh a 1984 penny, it should come in at about 2.5 grams. Earlier copper pennies from before 1982 weigh around 3.1 grams. This difference is another way collectors identify coins from different periods of the Lincoln cent series. Here's another surprising fact. Even though billions were produced, many 1984 pennies have disappeared from circulation over the decades. Coins are constantly lost, damaged, or removed by collectors. As time passes, high-quality examples become harder to find, especially those that still have their original mint luster. Collectors love coins that combine history, mystery, and the thrill of discovery. The 1984 no-mint mark penny offers exactly that experience. It reminds people that valuable collectibles can sometimes hide in the most ordinary places. For many coin enthusiasts, the excitement comes from searching through rolls of pennies from the bank or jars of spare change at home. Each coin becomes a tiny piece of history waiting to reveal something special. And that's one of the reasons the Lincoln cent series remains so popular today. It's affordable, widely available, and filled with fascinating varieties that reward careful observation. A small detail like a doubled ear can turn an everyday penny into a collectible piece that people actively seek. The 1984 doubled ear penny has become a perfect example of how small minting errors can capture the attention of collectors. What began as a tiny production mistake turned into one of the most talked about Lincoln cent varieties of the 1980s. Even today, thousands of people still search their change hoping to find one. And occasionally, someone does. Every year, collectors report new discoveries pulled from circulation decades after the coins were originally minted. So the next time you see a 1984 penny with no mint mark, take a moment to look a little closer. Check the date. Study Lincoln's ear. Use a magnifying glass if you have one. What appears to be a simple coin might actually hold a hidden story. Because in the world of coin collecting, the smallest details can make the biggest difference. And sometimes, the penny you almost ignored could turn out to be the most interesting coin in your collection. Imagine finding a single penny in your pocket that could be worth thousands of dollars. It looks ordinary, just another small copper coin among many others. Most people would ignore it without a second thought. But what if that one simple penny held a secret detail that only a few people know about? Today, we're looking at a coin that has surprised collectors for years. The 1992 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, it may seem common, but under the right conditions, this coin can become one of the most fascinating pennies of the modern era. The 1992 D Lincoln penny is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series that began in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln. For more than a century, these coins have circulated through the hands of millions of Americans. The design is familiar to almost everyone. On the front or obverse, you see the portrait of Lincoln facing to the right. Above his head is the word Liberty. The year of minting appears to the right, and the phrase "In God We Trust" arches along the top edge. Beneath the date on some coins, including the one we're discussing today, you will see a small letter D, which indicates that the coin was produced at the Denver Mint BY 1992. The Lincoln cent had already been part of American life for more than 80 years. The reverse side of the coin at that time still featured the well-known Lincoln Memorial design. This reverse was first introduced in 1959 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely at the memorial building on the coin, you can even see a tiny figure of Lincoln sitting inside the monument. It's one of the smallest but most impressive design details in U.S. coinage. The 1992 pennies were struck primarily from a metal mixture made of copper plating over a zinc core. This composition had been used since 1982, when rising copper prices forced the United States Mint to change the metal content of the penny. As a result, most modern pennies are much lighter than older copper coins. A 1992 penny typically weighs about 2.5 grams and has a thin copper-colored outer layered in terms of production numbers. The Denver Mint produced more than 4.4 billion Lincoln cents in 1992. That might sound like an enormous number, and it is. Most of these coins are still only worth 1 cent today. But within those billions of coins lies a small and extremely valuable variety that collectors are constantly searching for. This variety is known as the 1992 D-Close AM penny. To understand why this detail matters, we need to look closely at the reverse of the coin. On the back of the Lincoln Memorial penny, the words United States of America appear along the top, and the phrase 1 cent is written prominently in the center. At the bottom is the motto E pluribus unum. Now focus on the last word of that phrase, America. On most 1992 pennies, the letters A and M in the word America are spaced slightly apart. Collectors call this the wide AM style. But a very small number of coins from 1992 were struck with a different reverse design where the A and M are extremely close together, almost touching. This is called the close AM variety. The close AM design was actually intended for coins made in 1993 and later. Somehow, a few reverse dies with the upcoming design were accidentally used during the 1992 production run. When these dies were paired with the 1992 obverse dies, they created one of the most famous modern Lincoln cent varieties. What makes the 1992 D close AM penny especially exciting is how rare it is. Only a tiny number of these coins have been confirmed. Some estimates suggest that fewer than a dozen authentic examples may exist. That level of rarity immediately captured the attention of collectors across the United States. For years, people searched through jars of pennies, bankrolls, and pocket change hoping to discover one of these hidden treasures. And in a few incredible cases, someone actually did point. One well-known example of a 1992 D close AM penny was discovered in circulation and later graded by a professional coin grading service. When it appeared at auction, collectors quickly realized how rare it was. The coin eventually sold for tens of thousands of dollars. In one famous sale, a 1992 D close AM Lincoln cent graded in excellent condition sold for over $20,000. For a coin with a face value of just 1 cent, that kind of price is astonishing. It proves that even modern coins can become extraordinary when a rare variety is involved. But how can someone tell if they might have one of these valuable pennies? The key is careful observation. First, look at the mint mark. If the coin has a small D below the date, it was minted in Denver. That's the first requirement for this particular variety. Next, turn the coin over and examine the word America under good lighting. On the rare close AM version, the letters A and M will appear extremely close together, almost touching at their bases. On the more common wide AM version, there will be a clear gap between those two letters. Another small detail collectors often check involves the letters FG near the base of the Lincoln Memorial. These initials represent Frank Gasparo, the designer of the reverse. On genuine close AM varieties, the position of these initials may appear slightly different compared to the normal design. Because the difference between close AM and wide AM can be subtle, many collectors use magnifying tools such as a jeweler's loupe or a digital microscope. These tools help reveal the spacing between the letters much more clearly. Of course, whenever a coin becomes extremely valuable, the possibility of counterfeits or altered coins also increases. Some individuals may try to modify the coin's surface or misrepresent a normal penny as a rare variety. That's why serious collectors always recommend professional authentication. If someone believes they have discovered a 1992 D close AM penny, the best step is to send it to a reputable grading service. Professional graders carefully examine the coin, confirm its authenticity, and assign it a grade based on its condition. Once certified, the coin becomes much easier to sell and much more trusted by collectors. Beyond its potential value, the 1992 D close AM penny also carries an interesting story about how small design changes can create big surprises in the world of coin collecting. Something as tiny as the spacing between two letters can transform a 1-cent coin into a highly sought-after collectible. Another fascinating detail is how these coins were discovered. Many rare coin varieties were originally identified not by the mint itself, but by attentive collectors who noticed something unusual. In the case of the 1992 close AM variety, sharp-eyed hobbyists studying their coins realized that the letter spacing looked different from other pennies of the same year. This discovery shows that the world of coin collecting still holds mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Even in modern times, with billions of coins produced, small variations can slip through the minting process and later become prized collectibles. Collectors today continue to search through rolls of pennies hoping to find overlooked varieties like the 1992 close AM. It's a hobby that combines patience, curiosity, and a bit of luck. Every coin has the potential to reveal something unexpected. And that's part of the reason the Lincoln cent remains one of the most beloved coins in American history. For generations, it has been the first coin many people learned to recognize. Yet hidden among these everyday pennies are rare pieces that tell unique stories about the minting process and the history of American currency. The 1992 D Close AM penny stands as a perfect example of how an ordinary coin can become extraordinary. It reminds us that value isn't always obvious at first glance. Sometimes it's hidden in the smallest details, waiting for someone curious enough to notice, so the next time you receive change from a store or find a handful of pennies in a jar, take a closer look. That simple copper-colored coin might carry a detail that most people would miss. And who knows? Somewhere out there, another 1992 D Close AM penny may still be quietly circulating, waiting to be discovered by someone who decides to look just a little closer. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a simple penny, and almost ignoring it like most people do. Now imagine that same small copper coin quietly carrying a story that stretches back decades. A story of American history, craftsmanship, and sometimes surprising value. Today we are taking a closer look at a coin that millions of people have seen, but very few have truly noticed. The 1994 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. At first glance, this coin looks like just another ordinary cent. It is small, brown or copper-colored, and features one of the most recognizable faces in American history. Yet collectors and coin hunters often pause when they see a 1994 penny without a mint mark, because it represents a specific place and moment in the long history of United States coin production. The 1994 Lincoln penny is part of the famous Lincoln cent series, one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. The Lincoln cent was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. It was a groundbreaking moment because it was the first circulating American coin to feature a real historical figure instead of a symbolic image like Liberty. The designer of the Lincoln penny was Victor David Brenner, a sculptor whose portrait of Lincoln became one of the most recognizable coin designs ever created. His work captured Lincoln with a calm, thoughtful expression that has remained on the penny for more than a century. Even as the reverse design changed over the years, the front portrait of Lincoln remained largely the same. By the time 1994 arrived, the Lincoln penny had already been in circulation for 85 years. The United States Mint continued producing billions of these coins every year to keep up with everyday commerce. In 1994, pennies were produced at 3 different mint facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Coins struck in Denver carry a small D mint mark. Proof coins made in San Francisco carry an S. But coins produced at the Philadelphia Mint traditionally carried no mint mark at all. That is why when you see a 1994 penny without a mint mark, it means it was made in Philadelphia, the original home of the United States Mint. In 1994, the Philadelphia Mint produced billions of Lincoln pennies. Because of that high number, most 1994 no mint mark pennies are still considered common in circulated condition. Many people have probably handled dozens of them without even noticing. But coin collecting has a fascinating twist. Even coins that were made in huge numbers can become valuable under the right circumstances. The key factors are condition, rare minting errors, and special collector demand. The 1994 Lincoln penny was struck using a copper-plated zinc composition. Earlier pennies, especially those made before 1982, were mostly solid copper. But starting in the early 1980s, the U.S. Mint switched to a different metal mixture to reduce production costs. The 1994 penny contains a core of zinc with a thin outer layer of copper. In total, the coin weighs about 2.5 grams. To the naked eye, it still appears like a traditional copper penny, but its internal composition is different from the older coins many collectors grew up with. The front of the coin shows Abraham Lincoln facing right. Above his head, you will see the word Liberty on the left side and the motto "In God We Trust" across the top. The year 1994 appears to the right of Lincoln's portrait. If there is no mint mark under the date, that means the coin was produced in Philadelphia. On the reverse side, the design used in 1994 is the classic Lincoln Memorial. This design was introduced in 1959 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. It features the Lincoln Memorial Building in Washington, D.C., carefully engraved in tiny architectural detail. One of the most fascinating details is hidden right in the center of the memorial. If you look very closely, you can actually see a tiny image of the Lincoln statue inside the building. That means Lincoln appears twice on the same coin, once as a portrait on the front, and again as a statue on the reverse. For many collectors, this is one of the most charming details in American coin design. Now let's talk about why some 1994 no-mint mark pennies can attract serious attention from collectors. Even though billions were made, coins that survive in perfect or near-perfect condition can be surprisingly valuable. Most pennies enter circulation quickly and develop scratches, wear, and discoloration over time. Finding one that still looks brand new decades later is much harder. Professional grading services evaluate coins using a scale from 1 to 70. A coin graded MS-65 or higher is considered in excellent condition. But coins graded MS-67 or above are extremely difficult to find because they must show almost no visible flaws. A 1994 no-mint mark penny in average circulated condition is usually worth only a few cents. However, examples graded in very high mint state conditions can sell for significantly more. For example, certified coins graded around MS-67 have sold for several $100s in collector markets. In some cases, especially when the coin displays beautiful original red color and flawless surfaces, prices can climb even higher. But condition is only one piece of the puzzle. Another reason collectors study coins carefully is the possibility of minting errors. Errors occur during the production process when something unusual happens with the dies, planchets, or striking process. Some known error types that collectors watch for include double dies, off-center strikes, and die cracks. While major confirmed errors for the 1994 penny are not extremely common, occasional varieties and striking mistakes do appear. For example, some collectors have discovered 1994 pennies with noticeable doubling in the lettering or date. Others have found coins struck slightly off-center, where the design does not appear perfectly aligned with the edge. Error coins like these can attract much higher prices because they represent unusual moments in the minting process. Collectors love them because they are unique pieces of history that if you think you may have a special 1994 penny, the first step is careful examination. Look closely at the date and the area below it. If there is no mint mark, you know the coin was produced in Philadelphia. Next, check the condition of the coin. Coins with sharp details, strong luster, and minimal scratches are always more desirable. You can also examine the lettering and numbers with a magnifying glass. Look for signs of doubling, unusual shapes, or areas where the design seems misaligned. These details can sometimes indicate a rare variety. However, it is important to remember that not every unusual-looking coin is valuable. Circulation damage, scratches, and environmental wear can sometimes mimic the appearance of mint errors. That is why serious collectors often rely on professional grading services to authenticate and evaluate coins. These services examine the coin under magnification and provide an official grade and certification. One surprising fact about modern pennies like the 1994 Lincoln cent is that many people overlook them entirely. Because they are so common in everyday life, they rarely receive the attention given to older coins from the early 1900s, but modern coins can still hold hidden treasures. High-grade examples, unusual varieties, and error coins continue to appear in collections and even in pocket change. Another fun detail about the Lincoln penny is that it has survived many changes in American currency. Over the decades, rising metal prices have caused debates about whether the penny should continue to exist at all. Yet the coin remains one of the most familiar pieces of American money. The 1994 penny also represents an interesting period in U.S. mint history. During the 1990s, the mint was producing coins at an enormous scale while also improving quality control and modernizing equipment. Coins from this era often display strong strikes and consistent designs. For collectors, the challenge is finding the few examples that stand out above the rest. That is part of the thrill of coin collecting. Sometimes the most ordinary-looking coin can turn out to be the most interesting once you take a closer look. A simple penny can travel through thousands of hands over decades. It may pass through stores, vending machines, piggy banks, and jars of loose change. Along the way, it quietly becomes part of everyday history. Some collectors enjoy searching through rolls of pennies from banks, hoping to find hidden gems. Others carefully build sets of Lincoln cents from every year and mint mark. For many of them, the 1994 no mint mark penny is a reminder that even modern coins can become collectible pieces of the past. So the next time you see a penny dated 1994, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a moment to examine it. Look for the missing mint mark that tells you it was born in Philadelphia. Check its condition. Study the details of Lincoln's portrait and the tiny memorial on the back. Because sometimes the smallest coins hold the biggest stories. And who knows, the next ordinary penny you find might turn out to be a collector's treasure hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to notice it. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a simple copper-colored penny, and almost tossing it aside without a second thought. Now imagine discovering that this ordinary-looking coin might carry a story that stretches back more than 50 years, and in some rare cases, could even be worth far more than 1 cent. Today, we're exploring the fascinating story of the 1973 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that millions of Americans have seen, but very few have truly looked at closely. The 1973 D Lincoln penny is part of one of the most recognizable coin series in American history. The Lincoln cent was first introduced in 1909 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln's birth. It became the first circulating U.S. coin to feature a real historical figure. By 1973, this coin had already been part of American daily life for more than 60 years. The D Mint mark on this penny tells us that it was produced at the Denver Mint. During the early 1970s, the United States economy was going through significant changes. Inflation was rising, the country was dealing with the aftermath of the Vietnam War, and everyday Americans were seeing prices slowly climb. Despite these changes, the humble penny continued to play its role in everyday transactions. In 1973, the U.S. Mint produced a massive number of Lincoln pennies. At the Denver Mint alone, more than 3.5 billion pennies were struck. That number might make it sound like the 1973 D penny should be extremely common and almost worthless beyond its face value. And in many cases, that's true. Most circulated examples are only worth a few cents today. But as every experienced coin collector knows, the real story of a coin is not just about how many were made. It's about condition, unusual variations, minting errors, and the small details that separate ordinary coins from collectible treasures. Let's take a closer look at the design of the 1973 D Lincoln penny. On the front, also known as the obverse, you see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln. This design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. Lincoln faces to the right with the word Liberty appearing behind him. Above his head is the national motto, "In God We Trust." And just below the date 1973, you'll notice the small letter D, indicating the coin was struck in Denver. On the back of the coin, known as the reverse, you'll see the classic wheatless design that collectors call the Lincoln Memorial Reverse. This design was introduced in 1959 and shows the Lincoln Memorial Building in Washington, D.C. If you look closely, you can actually see a tiny image of Lincoln sitting inside the memorial between the columns. Above the building are the words United States of America, along with the motto E Pluribus Unum. At the bottom, the denomination reads 1 cent. The metal composition of the 1973 D penny is also part of its story. During this time, pennies were made mostly of copper. Specifically, they contained about 95% copper and 5% zinc. This composition gave the coins their rich reddish color when they were new. Over time, exposure to air and handling caused many of them to darken into the brown color most people recognize today. Now here is where things start to get interesting for collectors. Even though billions were minted, finding a 1973 D penny in perfect condition is surprisingly difficult. Most coins entered circulation immediately and were used heavily for decades. They were dropped into jars, passed through cash registers, and handled countless times. Coins that remain in uncirculated condition, especially those with a bright red copper surface, can be far more desirable to collectors. These are often labeled with grading terms like mint state, meaning the coin shows no signs of wear from circulation. In high grades, the value of a 1973 D penny can increase significantly. For example, a typical circulated coin might be worth only a few cents, but a well-preserved, uncirculated example graded MS-65 could sell for several dollars. And when you move into extremely high grades, such as MS-67 or better, the value can jump dramatically. There have been auction sales where exceptional 1973 D Lincoln pennies sold for hundreds of dollars simply because of their pristine condition. Coins with strong strike details, vibrant red color, and almost no marks from handling are especially prized by collectors. Another reason collectors search through rolls of pennies from this era is the possibility of mint errors. Mint errors happen during the production process at the mint, and they can create coins that are unique or extremely rare. One type of error collectors sometimes find on 1973D pennies is a double die. This happens when the coin's design is accidentally impressed twice at slightly different angles during the die creation process. The result can be noticeable doubling in letters or numbers on the coin. Another interesting error is an off-center strike. This occurs when the blank coin planchet is not properly centered when it is struck by the press. The result is a coin where part of the design is missing and the image appears shifted to one side. Collectors also keep an eye out for clipped planchets. These are coins where a piece of the metal blank was missing before the coin was struck. When this happens, the coin may have a curved or unusual shape along one edge. While these errors are not common, when they do appear on a 1973D penny, they can significantly increase the coin's value. Some rare error examples have sold for dozens or even hundreds of dollars depending on their uniqueness and condition. If you're curious about checking your own pennies, there are a few simple steps collectors use to identify a genuine 1973D Lincoln cent. First, look closely at the date and mint mark. The mint mark should appear just below the date on the obverse side. It should be small, clear, and neatly formed. Next, examine the coin's color. Collectors often categorize copper pennies as red, red-brown, or brown. Bright red coins that have been carefully preserved are usually the most valuable. Then check for unusual details. Use a magnifying glass to inspect the letters in Liberty, the date, and the words on the reverse side. If you notice doubling, misalignment, or anything that looks unusual, you may want to have the coin examined by a professional grading service. Weight is another clue. A standard 1973 copper penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If the weight is significantly different, it could indicate damage, alteration, or a different type of mint error. Here's a surprising fact that many people don't realize. Because so many pennies were produced in the early 1970s, millions of them are still hiding in old jars, piggy banks, and forgotten coin collections across the country. Every year, collectors search through rolls of bank pennies hoping to discover a perfectly preserved coin that has been overlooked for decades. Another fun detail about the 1973 Lincoln penny is that it represents a moment in American history when physical coins were still the center of everyday transactions. Credit cards were not nearly as common as they are today, and cash was used for almost everything. That meant pennies moved constantly through the economy, passing from hand to hand millions of times. For coin collectors, this constant movement makes the search even more exciting. The idea that a tiny coin could travel across the country for decades and eventually end up in a collector's hands adds a sense of adventure to the hobby. Today, the 1973D Lincoln penny remains popular among collectors who enjoy building complete sets of Lincoln cents by year and mint mark. Even though it's not considered one of the rarest pennies ever produced, it still holds an important place in the long history of American coinage. Collectors appreciate it not only for its design and history, but also for the challenge of finding one in truly exceptional condition. A coin that survived more than 50 years without losing its original shine is something special. And of course, the possibility of discovering a rare mint error adds an extra layer of excitement. Every penny has the potential to hold a surprise, and that sense of possibility keeps collectors searching. So the next time you come across a 1973D Lincoln penny, take a moment before you drop it into a jar or spend it without thinking. Look closely at its details. Notice the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, the tiny mint mark, and the memorial on the reverse side. Because while most of these coins may only be worth a single cent, a small number of them carry far greater value and an even greater story. Sometimes the most ordinary objects are the ones hiding the most fascinating history. And in the world of coin collecting, even a single penny from 1973 can open the door to a journey through American history, craftsmanship, and the thrill of discovery. Have you ever picked up a penny from your pocket and wondered if it might secretly be worth far more than 1 cent? Most people overlook the pennies they receive in change every day. But sometimes, an ordinary-looking coin can carry a story, history, and even a surprising value. One coin that often sparks curiosity among collectors is the 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. At first glance, it seems completely normal, but once you start learning about it, you may begin to see it in a very different way. The 1978 Lincoln penny is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series, one of the most recognizable coins in American history. The Lincoln cent first appeared in 1909 to celebrate the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. Since then, billions of these pennies have been produced, passing through the hands of everyday Americans for more than a century. The 1978 penny continues that legacy, but the version without a mint mark holds a special place in the story. When a coin has no mint mark, many people assume it might be an error. In the case of the 1978 penny, that is not exactly true. The absence of a mint mark simply means the coin was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. For many years, coins struck in Philadelphia did not include a mint mark at all. So when you see a 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, you are looking at a coin that came from the historic Philadelphia Mint, one of the oldest mint facilities in the United States. The year 1978 was an interesting time in American history. The country was recovering from economic struggles earlier in the decade, and everyday spending coins like the penny were being produced in enormous numbers to keep up with circulation. Millions upon millions of Lincoln pennies rolled off the presses that year. Most of them entered circulation immediately, becoming the small copper coins people used for daily purchases. The design of the 1978 Lincoln penny follows the classic appearance that Americans had been familiar with for decades. On the front, known as the obverse, you will see the right-facing portrait of Abraham Lincoln. This iconic image was designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. Above Lincoln's head appears the word Liberty, and to the right you will see the date 1978. The phrase "In God We Trust" arches across the top of the coin. When the coin has no mint mark, the area below the date remains blank. Turning the coin over reveals the reverse design that was used from 1959 until 2008. This side shows the Lincoln Memorial, the famous monument located in Washington, D.C. If you look closely, you can actually see a tiny image of the Lincoln statue inside the memorial building. Above the structure are the words United States of America, and along the top rim appears the phrase E pluribus unum. At the bottom you will find the denomination 1 cent. The metal composition of the 1978 penny is also important to understand. At that time, pennies were primarily made of copper. Specifically, they were composed of about 95% copper and 5% zinc. This gives the coin its familiar reddish-brown color and solid feel. Coins from this era are often heavier and richer in color compared to modern pennies, which today are mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. Because so many 1978 pennies were minted, most examples are not considered rare in circulated condition. However, that does not mean they are worthless to collectors. Condition plays a huge role in determining value. A penny that spent decades in pockets and cash registers may only be worth face value, but a perfectly preserved coin can be far more desirable. Collectors pay close attention to what is known as the coin's grade. A high-grade coin is one that shows very little wear and still has much of its original mint shine. When a 1978 no-mint mark penny is found in pristine, uncirculated condition, its value can increase significantly. Some coins that have been professionally graded and sealed in protective holders have sold for surprising amounts compared to their 1 cent face value. Another factor that can make certain 1978 pennies more valuable is the presence of minting errors. Errors happen when something unusual occurs during the production process. These can include off-center strikes, double images in the lettering, or coins that were struck on improperly prepared blanks. While these errors are not extremely common, when they do appear on a 1978 penny, collectors often become very interested. For example, a well-preserved 1978 penny with a noticeable double die effect in the lettering can attract attention in auctions. In these cases, parts of the design appear slightly doubled because the die that struck the coin had a misalignment during its creation. Even small doubling can increase collector interest. There have also been examples of 1978 pennies with off-center strikes. This happens when the coin blank is not properly positioned during the striking process. The result is a coin where part of the design is missing, while the remaining design appears shifted toward one side. These unusual coins are often saved by collectors because they show how mistakes during production can create unique pieces. When it comes to auction values, most ordinary circulated 1978 no-mint mark pennies are worth only a few cents. However, coins in exceptional condition can sell for much more. Some uncirculated examples graded at very high levels have sold for several $100s. In rare cases where the coin has both an excellent grade and a noticeable minting error, the price can climb even higher. Professional grading services play a major role in the coin collecting world. These companies carefully examine coins and assign them a grade based on their condition. Once graded, the coin is sealed in a protective holder that displays its certification. Collectors trust these grades when buying and selling coins, which helps establish fair market values. If you ever come across a 1978 penny with no mint mark and wonder whether it might be valuable, there are a few simple things to check. First, examine the overall condition. Look for coins that still have bright surfaces and sharp details. If Lincoln's hair and the lines of the Lincoln Memorial are crisp and clear, the coin may be in better condition than most. Next, look carefully for unusual features. Check the lettering and numbers for signs of doubling. Examine the edges of the design to see if anything looks misaligned or incomplete. Even small differences can sometimes indicate a mint error that makes the coin more interesting to collectors. Another helpful step is comparing your coin to verified images from reliable coin guides or collector resources. This can help you understand what a normal example looks like and whether your coin shows anything unusual. If a coin seems especially sharp or different, some collectors choose to send it to a grading service for professional evaluation. One surprising fact about the Lincoln penny series is just how many stories these coins carry. Every penny passes through countless hands during its lifetime. A 1978 penny might have been used to buy candy in the late 1970s, dropped into a vending machine in the 1980s, or saved in a jar for decades before being rediscovered. Another interesting detail is that many people overlook older pennies entirely. Because they seem so common, valuable pieces sometimes remain hidden in coin jars, drawers, or even old piggy banks. Collectors often say that one of the most exciting parts of the hobby is the simple act of searching through everyday coins. The Lincoln Cent series has become one of the most widely collected coin series in the United States. Some collectors focus on completing full date sets, while others search for the highest quality examples. Even coins that were produced in large quantities, like the 1978 penny, still hold appeal because they represent a specific moment in American history. For many collectors, the 1978 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is a reminder that not every valuable coin has to be extremely old or made of precious metal. Sometimes the value comes from condition, rarity of errors, or simply the challenge of finding a perfect example among millions of ordinary ones. Coin collecting is also a hobby that connects people across generations. A grandparent might pass down a small collection of coins, sparking curiosity in younger family members. Something as small as a penny can open the door to learning about history, art, and the fascinating process of how coins are made. Even today, collectors continue searching rolls of pennies from banks hoping to find hidden treasures. Every once in a while, someone discovers a coin in unusually good condition or with a striking error that had gone unnoticed for years. Moments like that keep the excitement of the hobby alive, so the next time you see a 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, take a closer look before tossing it aside. What appears to be a simple 1-cent coin might carry decades of history and the possibility of collector interest. While most of these pennies remain common, the right combination of condition, rarity, and curiosity can turn an ordinary coin into something far more fascinating. And who knows? The next valuable discovery might already be sitting quietly in a jar of spare change, waiting for someone curious enough to look just a little closer. Welcome back. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a simple penny, and discovering that the small copper coin you almost ignored could actually be worth far more than 1 cent. Most people overlook pennies every day, but sometimes a seemingly ordinary coin can hide a fascinating story and even surprising value. Today we are taking a closer look at the 1988 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that millions of Americans have seen but very few have truly examined. At first glance, the 1988 Lincoln penny without a mint mark looks completely normal. It carries the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. But like many coins produced in the United States, the details behind this penny tell a much deeper story about American history, coin production, and the world of collectors who carefully search their pocket change for hidden treasures. The Lincoln Cent series itself began back in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. It was the first regular U.S. coin to feature a real historical person instead of a symbolic figure. The portrait on the front of the coin was designed by Victor David Brenner, and that design stayed largely the same for nearly a century. By 1988, the Lincoln penny had already been circulating for almost 80 years, making it one of the most recognizable coins in American life. The year 1988 was a time when the United States Mint was producing enormous numbers of pennies. Billions of coins were made each year because pennies were still widely used in everyday transactions. The Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not place a mint mark on its pennies at that time, produced a large portion of the 1988 pennies. That is why many 1988 Lincoln cents appear with no mint mark at all. This does not mean the coin is missing something by mistake. It simply means it was struck in Philadelphia. Even though millions of these coins were produced, collectors are always interested in specific details that might make one coin different from another. The 1988 Lincoln penny was made from a copper-plated zinc composition. Earlier pennies had been made mostly of copper, but in 1982 the United States Mint changed the metal mixture to reduce costs. The modern penny became mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. This gave the coin the same familiar appearance while making it much cheaper to produce. The front of the coin shows the right-facing portrait of Abraham Lincoln. Above his head appears the word Liberty, and in front of him is the year 1988. The phrase "In God We Trust" is written along the top edge. On coins struck in Philadelphia that year, there is no mint mark next to the date. That blank space is what many collectors notice first. Turning the coin over reveals the Lincoln Memorial, which served as the reverse design of the penny from 1959 until 2008. If you look closely, you can actually see the small statue of Lincoln sitting inside the memorial building. It is one of the few coins in the world that shows the same person on both sides of the coin. Now here is where things get interesting for collectors. While most 1988 pennies without a mint mark are very common and worth only face value, certain varieties and high-quality examples can attract serious attention. Coin collectors often examine these pennies under magnification to look for tiny differences known as varieties or errors. One of the most talked about discoveries related to this year is the 1988 and 1988D reverse variety difference. Some coins from this period were struck using slightly different reverse designs that had been prepared for the following year. These subtle differences involve the lettering and spacing on the reverse of the coin. To an ordinary person, the coin may look identical, but trained collectors and grading experts can identify these small design changes. Because these varieties are difficult to spot, coins that clearly show the unusual design can become desirable to collectors who specialize in Lincoln cents. Even a small detail can turn a common coin into a collectible. One-dot condition also plays a huge role in the value of a coin. A 1988 Lincoln penny that has been circulating for decades will often show scratches, fading, and wear. But occasionally a coin survives in nearly perfect condition. These coins may have been stored in rolls, collections, or forgotten containers for many years. When a 1988 no mint mark penny appears in extremely high grade, collectors become interested. Professional coin grading companies evaluate coins based on their condition using a scale from 1 to 70. Coins graded in the high mint state range, especially MS65 and above, can be much more valuable than a worn example. There have been cases where high-grade 1988 Lincoln pennies have sold for surprising prices. While most are worth only a few cents, pristine coins certified by major grading companies have sold for several dollars or even higher depending on the grade and demand at the time of sale. For collectors who enjoy completing full date and mint sets, finding a sharply preserved example is always exciting. One reason collectors love Lincoln pennies is that they are accessible. Unlike rare gold coins or historic silver dollars, pennies are something almost everyone has handled. The idea that a valuable coin could be hiding in everyday change makes the search even more thrilling. If you want to check whether you have a 1988 penny with no mint mark, the process is simple. Start by looking directly under the date on the front of the coin. If you see a small letter like D or S, the coin was made in Denver or San Francisco. If there is no letter at all, the coin came from Philadelphia. Next, examine the condition of the coin. Coins that still have bright luster and sharp details may be worth keeping, especially if they appear almost untouched. Using a magnifying glass can help reveal small details in the lettering, Lincoln's portrait, and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. Collectors also recommend comparing the coin to known examples of reverse varieties if you are interested in searching for subtle design differences. While most coins will turn out to be the standard version, the excitement of checking is part of the fun. Another interesting fact about the 1988 penny is how widely it circulated across the United States. Because billions were produced, these coins traveled through countless hands, stores, and cash registers. Some may have been used to buy a newspaper, pay for a cup of coffee, or sit quietly in a jar of spare change for years. For many collectors, coins like the 1988 Lincoln penny represent more than just money. They are small pieces of American history. Each coin was struck by powerful presses inside the United States Mint and then released into the economy, where it began a journey through everyday life. Some collectors specialize only in Lincoln cents, building albums that include every year and mint mark. Completing these collections requires patience, attention to detail, and sometimes a bit of luck. Even common dates like 1988 become important pieces in the larger story of the series. There are also people who simply enjoy searching through penny rolls from banks, hoping to discover older coins, interesting varieties, or perfectly preserved examples. For them, the excitement is not just about value but about the possibility of discovery. It is also worth remembering that coin values can change over time. What seems like a simple coin today could become more desirable in the future as collectors continue studying varieties and as high-grade examples become harder to find. The 1988 Lincoln penny without a mint mark may not be the rarest coin in American history, but it perfectly represents the hidden stories that everyday coins can hold. A small piece of copper-plated metal can carry decades of history, travel, and possibility. So the next time you receive change at a store or empty the coins from your pocket, take a moment to look closely at those pennies. One of them might be a 1988 Lincoln cent from Philadelphia, quietly waiting to be noticed after years of being overlooked. And who knows? The ordinary penny you almost ignored might just spark a new curiosity about the fascinating world of coin collecting, where even the smallest coin can tell an unexpectedly big story. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a simple penny, and realizing that this tiny copper-colored coin might tell a story that stretches across American history. Most people never look twice at a 1-cent coin, but sometimes an ordinary-looking penny can spark curiosity among collectors and historians alike. The 1991 Lincoln penny without a mint mark is one of those coins that quietly passes through millions of hands, yet holds details that many people never notice. The 1991 no mint mark Lincoln penny is a coin that was produced in the United States during the early 1990s, a time when pennies were still widely used in everyday transactions. When people say, no mint mark, it simply means the coin does not show a small letter that indicates where it was made. For many collectors, that small detail raises an important question. Why does this penny have no mint mark, and could it be worth more than just 1 cent? To understand this coin, we need to step back and look at the history of the Lincoln penny itself. The Lincoln cent was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was the first regular U.S. coin to feature a real historical figure. Before that, American coins usually displayed symbolic images like Lady Liberty. The new design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner, who placed Lincoln's portrait on the front of the coin. That same basic design is still used today, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. By the time 1991 arrived, the Lincoln penny had already been part of American life for more than 80 years. In that year, the United States Mint produced billions of pennies to meet the needs of commerce. Most of these coins were struck at the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint. Coins from Denver usually carry a small D mint mark under the date. Coins from Philadelphia traditionally carried no mint mark at all for most of the 20th century. That is why a 1991 penny with no mint mark is not automatically rare. In fact, it usually means the coin was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, which has historically been the main coin-producing facility in the United States. During 1991, the Philadelphia Mint struck more than 4 billion Lincoln cents. That enormous number means many of these pennies are still circulating today. But even though the coin itself is common, collectors often look much deeper than the basic date and mint mark. They study the details of the design, the metal composition, and especially any unusual minting mistakes. Sometimes a small difference can turn an everyday coin into something much more valuable. The 1991 Lincoln penny is made mostly of zinc with a thin outer layer of copper. Earlier pennies, before 1982, were mostly copper. Rising metal prices forced the U.S. Mint to change the composition to reduce costs. As a result, the modern penny looks the same on the outside, but inside it is very different from older copper cents. On the front of the 1991 penny, you see Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. Above his head is the word liberty, and the phrase "In God We Trust" curves along the top edge. The year 1991 appears to the right of Lincoln's portrait. If the coin came from Philadelphia, there is no mint mark under the date. The back of the coin in 1991 still featured the classic wheat-era replacement design introduced in 1959. It shows the Lincoln Memorial Building in Washington, D.C. If you look closely between the columns of the memorial, you can actually see a tiny image of Lincoln's statue inside. This design remained on pennies until 2008. For most people, the 1991 penny looks identical to thousands of others. But collectors know that sometimes hidden variations can appear during the minting process. Coins are produced using metal blanks that are struck by heavy dies under immense pressure. When something goes wrong during this process, it can create an error coin. One type of error collectors search for is called a doubled die. This happens when the die used to strike the coin receives a slightly doubled image during its creation. The result can be letters or numbers that appear slightly doubled. In some cases, this doubling is easy to see with a magnifying glass. Another possible error involves off-center strikes. This occurs when the coin blank is not properly aligned when the design is pressed into it. The result is a coin where part of the design is missing and the image appears shifted to one side. Sometimes collectors also discover coins with die cracks, clipped planchets, or other unusual minting mistakes. While most 1991 pennies are worth only face value, coins with dramatic errors can attract significant attention from collectors. Over the years, a few interesting 1991 Lincoln cents have appeared in auctions and coin dealer listings. A normal circulated 1991 penny is usually worth only 1 cent, or perhaps a few cents to collectors who want an example for their collection. However, coins in exceptional condition can sell for more. For example, a 1991 Lincoln cent graded at the highest mint state levels by professional grading services can sell for several dollars or even more, depending on its quality. Coins that appear almost perfect under magnification are surprisingly difficult to find because most pennies enter circulation quickly and accumulate small scratches and wear. Error coins can sometimes reach much higher values. A dramatic off-center strike or a strong double die could sell for tens or even hundreds of dollars depending on the severity of the error and the interest of collectors. Because of these possibilities, many people begin to wonder if the pennies in their change might hold hidden value. Identifying a genuine collectible coin requires careful observation. The first step is to check the date clearly. The coin must show 1991. Next, look directly under the date. If there is no small letter, that means the coin was produced in Philadelphia. If you see a D, it came from the Denver Mint. Both versions exist, but collectors sometimes study each one for different varieties and errors. A magnifying glass can help reveal details that are invisible to the naked eye. Look closely at the numbers in the date and the letters in Liberty and In God We Trust. If the edges appear doubled or slightly shifted, it might indicate a double die variety. Also examine the coin's surface carefully. Look for unusual shapes, cracks, or missing sections that could indicate minting errors. However, it is important to remember that many marks on coins are simply damage from circulation rather than true mint errors. If someone believes they have found a valuable coin, professional grading services can examine and authenticate it. These companies use experts who evaluate the condition, confirm authenticity, and assign a grade that helps determine the coin's value in the collector market. Beyond value, there are some fascinating facts about the Lincoln penny that many people never realize. For instance, Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the penny makes him the only person in history to appear on both sides of the same circulating U.S. coin design. On the front you see his profile, and on the back of the Lincoln Memorial design you can see the tiny statue of him inside the building. Another interesting detail is the sheer number of pennies produced each year. In 1991 alone, billions were minted. If you stacked all the pennies made that year, the pile would stretch astonishing distances. Despite their tiny value, Pennies have played a major role in American culture. People drop them into jars, collect them in albums, and sometimes search through rolls of coins hoping to discover a hidden treasure. Collectors love coins like the 1991 Lincoln penny not necessarily because they are rare, but because they represent a moment in everyday history. Each coin passed through countless hands during grocery purchases, bus rides, and daily transactions. Every scratch and mark tells a small piece of that story. For beginners, coins like this are also an easy way to start collecting. Unlike rare gold coins or early silver dollars, Lincoln pennies are affordable and widely available. Yet within that common series, there are still exciting discoveries waiting to be found. Some collectors build entire collections based only on Lincoln cents, searching for every date, mint mark, and known variety. Others enjoy the thrill of hunting for errors that slipped past the mint's quality checks. The 1991 no-mint mark Lincoln penny reminds us that value in coin collecting is not always about rarity alone. Sometimes it is about curiosity, observation, and the excitement of learning the history behind everyday objects. The next time you receive change from a store or find a penny lying on the ground, take a moment to look at it closely. That small coin might seem ordinary, but it carries more than a century of American design tradition and minting history. And who knows? Among the billions of pennies still circulating, one unusual coin could still be waiting to surprise someone who decides to look just a little closer. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a single penny, and discovering that the small copper coin in your hand might be worth far more than 1 cent. It sounds unlikely, but for many coin collectors across the United States, that exact moment has happened. Sometimes the most ordinary-looking coins carry stories, history, and surprising value. And today we're exploring one coin that many people overlook every day, the 2006 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, the 2006 D Lincoln penny looks like a typical modern cent. It's small, copper-colored, and easy to ignore. Millions of Americans have handled this coin without ever giving it a second thought. But behind that simple design lies a piece of American history, a story about coin production, and a few hidden details that can make certain examples surprisingly interesting to collectors. The Lincoln penny itself has one of the longest and most recognizable histories in American coinage. It was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Before that year, no real historical figure had ever appeared on a circulating American coin. The United States Mint decided to change that tradition, and Lincoln became the first president featured on everyday currency. The design that appeared in 1909 was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. On the front of the coin, also called the obverse, Brenner designed the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. Above Lincoln's head appears the word liberty, while the phrase "In God We Trust" sits across the top. The date of the coin appears in front of Lincoln's portrait, and when the coin is minted in Denver, a small letter D appears just below the date. That small letter is known as the mint mark. It tells collectors exactly where the coin was produced. In the case of the 2006 D Lincoln penny, the coin was struck at the Denver Mint in Colorado. Every year, the United States Mint produces billions of pennies to keep up with demand, and in 2006 the Denver Mint produced well over 3 billion Lincoln cents. With such a massive number produced, you might assume that the 2006 D penny is extremely common and therefore not worth collecting. And in many cases, that's true. Most examples of this coin are worth only their face value. But coin collecting has always been about details, condition, and rare mistakes made during the minting process. To understand why collectors still search through rolls of pennies looking for coins like this, we need to look more closely at how the 2006 D Lincoln penny was made. BY 2006. The composition of the penny had already changed from the earlier solid copper coins of the 20th century. Modern pennies, including the 2006 version, are made mostly of zinc with a thin copper plating on the outside. This gives the coin its familiar copper color while keeping production costs lower for the U.S. Mint. Each coin weighs about 2.5 grams and measures just under 20 millimeters in diameter. The edges are smooth, unlike the ridged edges you see on coins like quarters or dimes. The reverse side of the 2006 Lincoln penny still featured the classic wheat successor design known as the Lincoln Memorial. This design was introduced in 1959 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. At the center of the reverse side stands the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. If you look closely enough with magnification, you can actually see a tiny image of Lincoln sitting inside the memorial building. Above the monument appear the words United States of America, while the phrase E pluribus unum is written across the top. Below the memorial is the coin's denomination, 1 cent. For decades, this design remained a familiar sight in American pocket change, and the 2060 penny is part of that long-running series. But here's where things start to become interesting for collectors. Even when billions of coins are produced, small errors can occur during the minting process. Sometimes the metal planchet, which is the blank coin before it's struck, can be imperfect. Other times the dies used to stamp the coin's design may develop tiny cracks or doubling. These small mistakes can turn an ordinary penny into a collectible piece. Some 2006 Lincoln pennies have been discovered with die cracks, which appear as thin raised lines across parts of the coin. Others show signs of minor doubling in the lettering or date. While not extremely rare, collectors still enjoy searching for these variations. Another factor that can dramatically increase a coin's value is its condition. Coins that have never entered circulation and remain in pristine shape are described as mint state. These coins often come from original bank rolls or collector sets and show no signs of wear. A typical circulated 2060 penny might only be worth 1 cent, but a flawless mint state example graded at the very highest levels by professional grading services can sell for significantly more. For example, some high-grade 2006 Lincoln pennies graded MS67 or higher have sold for over $100 at auction. That may not sound like a fortune, but considering the coin originally had a face value of just 1 cent, the increase in value is remarkable. In rare cases where a coin shows both exceptional condition and a noticeable mint error, the value can climb even higher. Collectors often search through rolls of pennies from banks, hoping to find one of these overlooked gems. It's a hobby sometimes called coin roll hunting, and it has become surprisingly popular. So how can someone tell if they might have a valuable 2006 penny? The first step is to look for the mint mark. Under the date on the front of the coin, there should be a small letter D. This confirms the coin was minted in Denver. Next, examine the coin carefully under good lighting. Look for sharp details in Lincoln's hair and beard. Coins with crisp, unworn features are more desirable than those that have been heavily circulated. A magnifying glass or coin loop can help reveal tiny details. Look for unusual doubling in the letters, cracks in the design, or other unusual marks that appear raised rather than scratched into the surface. Another sign of a high-quality coin is its luster. Mint state coins often have a bright shine that moves across the surface as the coin is tilted in the light. However, collectors should always be cautious about coins that look artificially shiny. Some people attempt to clean or polish coins to make them appear more valuable, but cleaning usually lowers a coin's worth in the eyes of serious collectors. Authentic valuable coins typically show natural surfaces without harsh scratches or unnatural brightness. One fascinating fact about the Lincoln Penny series is that it has become one of the most widely collected coin series in the United States. Because pennies are so common and inexpensive, many people begin their coin collecting journey by searching through pocket change. This is exactly why coins like the 2006 penny still capture attention today. Even though millions were produced, there's always the possibility of discovering a perfectly preserved example or a rare mint error hiding among ordinary coins. Another interesting detail is that the Lincoln Memorial design used on the 2006 penny would soon come to an end. In 2009, the United States Mint released a special series of 4 new reverse designs celebrating the bicentennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth. These coins showed scenes from Lincoln's life, replacing the long-running memorial image. After that, in 2010, the reverse design changed again to the Union Shield that appears on modern pennies today. Because of these design transitions, the 2006 Lincoln penny represents the final years of the classic Lincoln Memorial era, a period that lasted half a century. For collectors who enjoy completing date and mint collections, every year matters. That includes coins like the 2006 which helps complete the later chapters of the Lincoln Memorial series. And there's also something else that keeps collectors interested in modern coins. Even though they are recent, their future rarity is still unknown. Over time, many coins are lost, damaged, or removed from circulation. Decades from now, finding pristine examples may become much harder than it seems today. That possibility adds another layer of excitement for collectors who save high-quality coins from each year, so the next time you see a penny dated 2006 with a small D under the date, take a moment to look at it a little more closely. It may not immediately look special, but every coin carries a story. It represents a moment in American minting history, part of a series that has connected generations of people through everyday pocket change. And who knows? Hidden among thousands of ordinary pennies could be a flawless example or a fascinating mint error waiting to be discovered. Sometimes the smallest coins hold the biggest surprises, and that simple 2006 D Lincoln penny might just remind us that even a single cent can have a story worth far more than its face value.